name. And the people of God can say amen. Amen. If you love the Lord, come on and say amen again. If you love the Lord, come on and clap your hands for your people. The word is of God. Look at us and train. For sure God is good and God is worthy of our praise. I want to invite your attention to the Gospel according to John chapter 4. For those of you who are with us, joining us on today, I'm in the midst of a series of sermons. The series is titled Dealing with Opposition When You're on God's Mission. This is part 2 in that series, Dealing with Opposition When You're on God's Mission. And I want to go to John chapter 4. There's a very familiar story in John chapter 4. I will not read the entire story, but invite you to read it on your own, amen, when you get home or later on during the week. But I want to go to John chapter 4, beginning at verse number 5. I'm only going to read the beginning of the story and talk about the story as I work my way through the message. John chapter 4, beginning at verse 5, we find these words. So he, being Jesus, came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink of me, a Samaritan woman? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is that saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you some living water." Amen. I want to tag this text and begin to share from this subject, communication problems. Amen. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. This is the second installment in the Dealing with Opposition When You're on God's Mission series, and I'm titling part 2, Communication Problems. Let me start today by apologizing to those of you who are visiting with us for Family and Friends Day, because I'm in the middle of a series of messages inspired by a series of events that none of you know anything about. But if you find me on Facebook and scroll back over the last 2 weeks of my posts, you will see some posts and some videos that will tell you the whole story. But let me try to bring you up to speed by giving you the short version of a long story. Just over 2 weeks ago, we embarked on a mission to collect and to transport a U-Haul truckload full of water and other supplies that we had collected to Jackson, Mississippi, where residents have no water because the water filtration plant was knocked offline by storms and by floods. Jackson, Mississippi is only about a 6-hour drive from Dallas, Texas, and this was supposed to be a one-day turnaround trip. But what was supposed to be a one-day turnaround trip turned into a 3-day adventure because we kept running into problems all along the way. Taylor and Tyler Woods, who have experience, volunteered to drive the big spot truck from Dallas to Jackson, but they canceled on us the day before the trip because they could not get off of work due to a scheduling problem. We found a replacement truck driver on Tuesday night, loaded up the water and the supplies that we had collected here in Dallas on Wednesday morning. We drove east and picked up water and supplies in Tyler, Texas on Wednesday morning, kept on driving east, picked up more water and more supplies that were being held in Longview, Texas. We got to Longview on Wednesday morning and we end up being stuck in Longview, Texas Wednesday afternoon and all night Wednesday night because the truck that we were driving had mechanical problems. U-Haul sent the replacement truck to meet us in Longview, and there were thousands of cases of water and hundreds of boxes of supplies that needed to be transferred from the old truck onto the new truck. But since there were only 3 of us and it was 11 o'clock on Wednesday night, that created a logistical problem. We got the new truck loaded by 2 o'clock on Thursday morning, slept for about 3 hours, then got on the road on Thursday to finish the drive to Jackson with fatigue problems. But then 20 miles outside east of Monroe, Louisiana, one of the tires on the replacement truck had a blowout, which was a manufacturer's problem. And after the tire was replaced, we got back on the road to Jackson, Mississippi on Thursday afternoon. But because we were a day late when we got to Jackson, there was nobody there to help us unload the truck, which was a labor problem. But soon folks from the church and the neighborhood showed up to help us do the work. But when we tried to return the truck to U-Haul in Jackson, the viaducts were too low, which caused an accessibility problem. Then when we finally got the truck returned, we got in a minivan and drove all the way back to Dallas. We were coming through Mesquite when a Lion State Trooper pulled me over for doing 92 in a 75, and that caused a legal problem. And like I told you last week, none of these problems particularly bothered me. Yes, they inconvenienced me. Yes, they delayed me, but they did not really bother me, especially because God was teaching me some lessons all along the way. But there were a series of problems that did bother me, and they were not the mechanical problems or the logistical problems, but the series of problems that bothered me were the communication problems. Because when I called U-Haul's roadside assistance while we were in Longview on Wednesday at 1 p.m., I was telling the dispatcher where we were at the Exxon gas station on I-20 and FM 968 so they could send us assistance. But the dispatcher said, I'm going to send you a text message, and in the text message there's a link, and when you get the link, click on the link, and the link will contact your phone's GPS, and it will give us the exact location where you are. So she sent me the link, and I clicked the link, but the link could not communicate my location because there was a communication problem. Finally, when she listened to me talk and let me just give her my location, she dispatched help to a repairman to help us, who was supposed to arrive in 2 hours, but he wasn't there 3 hours later, and we were still waiting with no update on his ETA because we were having communication problems. On Thursday, when we got into the new truck and were driving on further towards Jackson, when the second truck, the replacement truck, had to blow out, and we called for roadside assistance again, they tried to send me the link again to get my exact location. This time we were on the side of the road, and again the link, which was supposed to give my location, did not give my location because we were still having some communication problems. But the issue that got me the most, the one that really did it for me, was after being stuck in Longview, Texas for over 12 hours, and after moving thousands of cases of water and hundreds of boxes of supplies from one truck to the replacement truck, we got a hotel to sleep in for about 3 hours before we were gonna get on the road again. It was 1 a.m. We were sweaty and we were stinking. Walmart was closed. Walgreens was closed. All of the stores in Longview, Texas were closed. But there was a big old Shell gas station across the street from the hotel. The Shell gas station had a the Texas Best Smokehouse inside the gas station. It was a big old gas station, y'all. And we went over into the gas station convenience store looking for some supplies to freshen up and to clean up. We went into the gas station looking for some t-shirts that we could wear to get these funky clothes off of our body. And I went to the counter in the gas station and I asked the man behind the counter if they sold toiletries. He looked at me and said, "What?" I said, "Toiletries." He looked at me again and said, "What?" I said, "Toiletries." He said, "Toiletries? Are you trying to say toilet paper?" I looked at him, y'all, with that same look that Steve Harvey gives contestants on Family Feud when they give a stupid answer. I looked at him with that same look. I wanted to cuss. I wanted to say, "What the what?" But I just stood there silent for about 3 seconds and looked at him because I realized in that moment that we were having a communication problem. And I wonder if there's anybody here who has ever had some communication problems. Trying to talk to your teenage children, but you're having communication problems. Trying to talk to your babe or your boo, but you keep having communication problems. You're trying to talk with your bestie, but you are having communication problems. Kids, have you ever tried to explain something to your parents that your parents just didn't seem to understand because you are having some communication problems? Hello? Has anybody here ever been trying to talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to your co-workers, talk to a stranger, but your efforts to help are being hindered by a communication problem? And it's not that you don't have the words. They just don't seem to understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. They are not comprehending the words that are coming out of your mouth. They are misunderstanding you, or you are misunderstanding them. And because of the communication problems, what was supposed to be a simple conversation turned into a serious conflict. You got into the conversation hoping for some compassion and some understanding, but you walked away from the convo with nothing but frustration and irritation because there were communication problems. Well, that's where the conversation appears to be headed in today's pericope. As Jesus talks to the woman he meets at the well, it is obvious that they are having some communication problems. I did not read the whole story, but let me tell you what's about to happen. Jesus says to the woman, "Give me a drink." And the woman says, "Why are you talking to me?" Jesus says, "If you knew who I was, you would ask me for some living water." And she says, "You don't even have a bucket or a rope to draw up some well water. How in the world are you going to get some living water?" Well, Jesus says back to her that whoever drinks of this well water will get thirsty again. But if you drink of the living water that I give you, you will never get thirsty. To which the woman says, "Well, give me this water that you are talking about, so I don't have to keep coming down to this well every other day just to get a drink." Jesus said to her, "Well, lady, won't you go call your husband and let him come help you?" The lady said, "Man, I ain't got no husband." And Jesus said, "You right, lady, you don't have a husband, but the record says you done had 5 husbands, and you living with a man right now who is not your husband." Y'all know the story. having some communication problems. Their communication is contentious. Their tone is tense. Their attitudes are adversarial and argumentative. There is no denying there's a communication problem. There is no dismissing that or downplaying that. But if you look at the text again with an eye for detail, you will discover that what looks like a communication problem on the surface is really a connection problem. And I came to help somebody today who thinks you are having communication problems. I want to tell you, as I look at the text, that what you think is a communication problem may really be a connection problem. Can I rewind, repeat to help somebody today? That's point number one as we look at the text, that it is not a communication problem. You really have a connection problem. Oh, I'm preaching up in here whether you realize it yet or not, because in the text, both Jesus and the woman at the well are Jews who speak and understand Hebrew. In the text, neither Jesus nor the woman have a hearing aid. That means they are not hard of hearing. But just like the man at the gas station, when I asked about toiletries, he thought I was mispronouncing toilet paper. We were both speaking English, and neither one of us had a hearing aid. That says neither of us was hard of hearing. We were not having a communication problem. We were really having a connection problem. Because anytime two people speak the same language and comprehend the same language and have the ability to hear, the problem is not in the communication. The problem is in the connection. And in the text, the woman whom Jesus meets at the well lets us know plain and clear that there is a problem with their connection. Look at the text, John chapter 4, when Jesus asked the woman for a drink, verse 9 says, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan, for a drink? You Jews don't deal with us Samaritans. You Jews look down on us. You Jews think you are better than us. You Jews think that our people are beneath your people. Watch this, y'all. Both Jews and Samaritans were descendants of Abraham and Sarah. Both Jews and Samaritans had ancestors who received the divine promise of God. But what had happened was that there were some Jews who during the Assyrian conquest were rumored to be marrying and having babies with Assyrians. And these offspring became known as Samaritans. They were considered mixed. They were called by some Jews half-breeds. So the woman at the well says to Jesus, why are you talking to me when your people have nothing to do with my people? It is not a communication problem. It is a connection problem. And on that journey to Jackson, Mississippi, what I started out calling communication issues really turned out to be some connection issues. Because watch this, the same phone that could not communicate with the GPS satellite of U-Haul's roadside assistance was communicating just fine with Google Maps because they were connected. My phone was communicating fine with the Waze app satellite because they were connected. But it was not communicating with U-Haul's roadside assistance satellite because there was a problem establishing a connection. Oh, I'm about to get in trouble, but I got to tell somebody the truth. I'm about to make some people mad, but I hope you still get my message. Listen, y'all, just because your babe or your boo is not communicating with you, it does not mean they're not communicating with somebody else they have a stronger connection to. Just because your teenage children are not communicating with you or your bestie is not communicating with you, or your sister or your brother or your cousin is not communicating with you, just because your colleagues, your friends, or even strangers are not communicating with you. Listen, they may not be communicating with you, but they may be communicating with somebody else who at the moment they have a stronger connection to. Because when we are connected, we communicate. And when we are connected, we understand each other. When we are connected, I don't mind being vulnerable around you or exposing my weaknesses to you. When we are connected, I don't need to have a filter. When we are connected, I will share my deepest, darkest secrets. When we are connected, I can hear the words that you say, and I can read your body language to pick up on messages that you don't say. When we are connected, we can communicate without even using our words. When we are connected, I can understand your looks. I can interpret your silence. I know how to help you even when nobody else is hearing anything from you, because we are connected. And when we're connected, we won't be distracted by some minor interference. So I know you may think that you are having communication problems. I know you think you're having a problem communicating with your spouse, a problem communicating with your siblings, a problem communicating with your family, your friends, and with everybody else. But I came to sagaciously suggest to you that the problem that you are having is not a communication problem. You are having a connection problem. Am I helping anybody? Am I helping anybody on this Family and Friends Day? I want to leave you with that first lesson, that powerful point, that it is not a communication problem. It is a connection problem. But then number two from the text tells us this, that since it's a connection problem, watch it, number two, don't analyze the communication, adjust the connection. I'm trying to help y'all this Family and Friends Day. Don't analyze the communication, just adjust your connection, because you keep getting caught up and tied up and tangled up in who said and how they said and what they said. But the text tells us, number two, that when you realize it's a connection problem, don't analyze the communication, just adjust the connection. Because the convo in the text between Jesus and the woman at the well could have easily devolved into a shouting match. It could have easily turned into cussing and fussing, especially when Jesus started talking about how many women, about how many husbands the woman had, and was shacking up with the boo without the benefit of a wedding band. You know how people do not like for you to start throwing their business up in their faces. People do not like to be reminded about their mistakes or their failures. People don't like to be reminded about the time they hurt you, disappointed you, or let you down. People don't like to be reminded of their sins or their shortcomings. The conversation in the text then was getting real contentious. It's like when I was at the gas station and I asked that man whether they sold toiletries, and he said, "What?" And I said, "Toiletries." He said, "What?" And I said, "Toiletries." And he said, "Are you trying to say toilet paper?" In my mind, I wanted to ask, "Are you slow?" In my mind, I said to myself, maybe I'm from Chicago and they don't know about toiletries in Texas. In my mind, I said, but no, we talk about toiletries in Dallas. Maybe they don't have toiletries or use toiletries in Longview. No offense if that's your home soil. But rather than saying what was in my mind, I ignored my thoughts, ignored my insults, ignored my questions, and I said, "No, sir, I'm looking for things like toothpaste, a toothbrush, some soap and deodorant. He said, oh, well, that stuff is yonder side. Oh, aisle one. This way back there in the corner. In other words, my friends, when I adjusted the frequency at which I was trying to communicate, then he and I were able to make a connection. And when we connected, I could understand what he was trying to say. He could understand what I was trying to get. And he was able to help me get what I needed. And when I was trying to get roadside assistance from U-Haul, the dispatchers on Wednesday and the dispatcher on Thursday kept trying to get me to use their app in their system. But the app wasn't connecting properly with my phone in a way that allowed them to communicate. So I had to ask them both times, can I just use Google Maps? And can I use my own eyesight to tell you where I am and to tell you what's around me? Because the goal is to locate me. But the way you are trying to locate me is not helping you to locate me. So if we try a different way, we may connect a little better. And if we connect a little better, the communication just might work. I like that in the text that's before us on today. Jesus and the woman were not connecting. They were not connecting when they were talking about water. They were not connecting when they were talking about Jews and Samaritans. They were not connecting when they talked about her former husband nor her current living boyfriend. They were not connecting when they were talking about the mountain where the Jews say to worship versus the mountain where the Samaritans say to worship. But even though they did not connect, in verses 5 or verses 7 through 24, something happened in verse 25. In verse 25, the woman says, I know that a Messiah is coming. And when the Messiah comes, he will settle all these disputes. I know that a Messiah is coming. And when the Messiah comes, he will resolve all of our divisions. I know that a Messiah is coming. And when the Messiah comes, he will tell us and teach us all of the right things. And in verse 26, Jesus looks at the woman and says, woman, I am the Messiah. The one you've been waiting for is standing right here. The one you've been looking for is the one who's looking at you face to face. I am the one that you've been waiting for and looking for. And from the moment of the realization that she's looking for a Messiah and Jesus is the Messiah, from that moment, the tone of their communication begins to change, because in that moment, they made a connection. Can I bless somebody up in here having communication problems in your house? I help you today. Talking louder is not going to help you to fix your communication problems. Cussing and fussing is not going to help you fix your communication problems. Using big words that you learned from a book are not going to help you fix your communication problems. Those inspirational quotes that you use to send subliminal messages on Facebook and Instagram, they are not going to help you fix your communication problems. You've got to adjust the connection in order to fix the communication. And you might have to shut up and listen sometimes to adjust your connection. You might have to learn how to laugh again in order to adjust your connection. You might have to pull away from your job and working all the time in order to adjust your connection. You might have to reinstitute date night or go on a vacation to fix your connection. You might have to admit that you were wrong in order to adjust your connection. You might have to apologize to somebody to fix your connection. You might have to do some therapy. You might have to do some counseling. You might have to let go of the past and focus on the future. You might have to agree to wipe the slate clean and start all over again if you really want to adjust your connection. And even though you're not saying amen, I know I'm still feel right about it. And the reason I know I'm right is because isn't that exactly what God did for us? We were disconnected by sin, but God didn't keep calling us sinners. We were disconnected by disobedience, but God did not keep telling us to do better and do better. God did not keep reminding us of what we were doing wrong, but God stepped in and adjusted the connection. That's why he sent Jesus to be our Savior. He was adjusting the connection. Living, he loved me to adjust the connection. Dying, he saved me to adjust the connection. Buried, he carried my sins away to adjust the connection. But rising, he justified me to adjust the connection. He freed me forever to adjust the connection. And one of these old days, my Savior is coming back to adjust the connection. Oh, what a glorious day that will be. So don't analyze the communication. You got to learn how to adjust your connection. Adjust your connection with your spouse. Adjust your connection with your kids. Adjust your connection with your siblings. Adjust your connection with your church. Adjust your connection with your co-workers. Adjust your connection with your enemies. Adjust your connection with your adversaries. And above all, adjust your connection with God. Because you don't have a communication problem. God is still good and God is still God. You don't have a communication problem. The God I serve is still in the prayer hearing and the prayer answering business. You don't have a communication problem. The God that I serve is still opening windows and pouring out blessings you don't have room enough to receive. You don't have a communication problem that God sits high and yet he looks low. You don't have a communication problem. You have a connection problem. And if you adjust the connection, you can get the power of communication. Well, I got to go. I know you got to go too. But third and finally, look at what the text says. The text says to us, the text says don't adjust the communication. The text says to us, don't analyze the communication. You got to adjust the connection. But watch it, third and finally, the text says this, that when you fix the connection, you can increase the communication. I like that. Sounds so simple, but it makes a big difference. The text says that when you fix the connection, watch it, you can increase the communication. I like that. Listen. When we were at a stalemate, when the U-Haul dispatcher kept trying to get us to use their app, and we were waiting, but nothing was working. As long as U-Haul kept insisting on us doing things their way, we stayed stuck in the same position, not making progress on the trip and not making progress towards resolving the problems. We were stalled and we were silent, holding my phone and waiting for the U-Haul GPS app to connect. But when the U-Haul dispatcher and I connected in a way that allowed me to communicate where I was, all of a sudden the dispatcher and I started talking again. Not because there was a problem with our communication, but because we had found a way to establish a real and solid connection. And when we were talking, the U-Haul dispatcher and I on the phone, when we connected, I told her where I was. She got on the computer on her end. She says, I can see the intersection where you are. I can see the highway that you said is intersecting with the place where you say that you are. And because I have found the place where you are, based upon the new connection that we have, she began to tell me when help would arrive and what kind of help would arrive on the scene. Well, because she and I were talking, I began to talk to Elmer and Demontric, and the things that she was saying to me, I began saying to the two men who were traveling along with me. In other words, here on today. Because when Jesus and this woman at the well got connected, not only did the Bible says that she kept on talking to Jesus, but the Bible says that she left her water bucket there at the well, and she ran back home and began to talk about Jesus to somebody who was at the house with her. Y'all not missing, y'all not getting it just yet. She came to the well with a bucket to get some water, but because she connected with Jesus, she left her burden at the well and went home and told somebody how she made a connection that caused her to be blessed. I wish there was somebody in the house today who came here carrying a burden. You get your bucket down and take on more burden. I wish there was somebody here today who came in with a burden of sorrow, who came in with a burden of despair, who came in with a burden of heartbreak, but you met Jesus at this well, and it's causing you to leave the bucket of burdens and make you want to go home and tell somebody that I made a connection that reminds me that I am blessed. Is there anybody here today who's like the woman at the well that you can go tell somebody, I've been talking to a man and you ought to come talk to him too? Is there anybody here today that can be like the woman at the well that can go tell somebody else, come and meet a man who told me everything about me, and if you trust in him, he can set you free? Because she was connected, she had to go connect somebody else because she had been communicating. She had to go communicate with somebody else. It reminds me of that Sprint commercial. Y'all know the commercial from years ago. In the commercial, the man would pick up his phone, and while he was talking on the phone, I don't know what he was talking about, but after a while, he started saying, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? He began to move from place to place and said, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me over here? Can you hear me back here? Can you hear me over there? The point of the commercial was that there is nothing wrong with our communication. The real problem is with our connection. And when we get to a place where the connection is strong, then I can hear you and you can hear me. I am so glad that I got me a connection, and now I can hear my Savior say, man, I love you. I got a connection, and I can hear you now say, man, don't you quit, and man, don't you give up. I got a connection that allows me to hear my God say that I'll be with you even to the ends of the earth. Is there anybody here? Can you hear God now? Can you hear God now? Sing your weeping vain, endure for a night. But I declare that your joy has got to come in the morning. Is there anybody here who can hear God say, fret not thyself because of evildoers, and neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity? Is there anybody here who can hear God say, greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world? Is there anybody here who can hear God say, that I know the plan I have for you to prosper you and keep you in peace? Is there anybody here that can look up to heaven and say, yes, my Lord, I can hear you now. You're telling me don't quit. I can hear you now. You're telling me to forgive. I can hear you now. You're telling me to keep going. I can hear you now. You're telling me you got it. I can hear you now. You're telling to counsel with couples thinking about getting married, one of the first lessons that I teach them is that marriage is not compromise. Compromise kills marriage. Compromise is a band-aid. It'll make you happy for a little while, but after a while the compromise is going to expose that the root of the problem has not been solved. We go through this one of the first lessons. Marriage is not about communication. It's really about connection. Whenever there's a problem in a marriage, in a family, in any kind of friendship or relationship, I guarantee you, it is always a connection problem. And we spend time arguing with each other, fighting with each other, and cussing each other, and not talking to each other, because we think it's about communication. The truth of the matter is, it's all about the connection. Where there's connection, there's communication. Where there's connection, there's cooperation. Where there's connection, there's intimacy. Where there's connection, there's laughter. Where there's connection, there's empathy. Where there's connection, there's even sympathy. Where there's connection, there's equality. Where there's connection, there's liberation. Where there's connection, there's love. And the reason I know that about human relationships is because that's what I learned from the divine relationship. Salvation is all about our connection to God. And in being connected, I find peace. In being connected, I find joy. In being connected, I find love. In being connected, I find hope. In being connected, I find blessings. The blessing, the hope, the benefit, the good thing is in the connection. When I'm connected, I can hear God speak to me. And I know God is listening when I speak back to God. Today, somebody needs to work on your connection. I'm not just talking about your connection with your family. You need to work on your connection first with God. I remember one of my mentors in ministry who is now deceased. One of the most powerful things he ever said to me, he said that a person who cannot express themselves to God cannot express themselves to anybody else. Get your connection with God right first. You've got to know how to cry to God first. See, you've just been trying to cry to people. You got to learn to cry out to God first. Get that right. You've just been talking to people. No, you got to learn how to talk to God first. Get that right. Somebody needs to work on their connection with God today. And I'm going to open the doors even right now for you to establish or to reestablish your connection. Maybe you've never had that connection before, but the doors are open for you to connect with God. Connecting with God means confessing. God, I'm a sinner, but I believe in your Son Jesus as Savior. That establishes the connection. Somebody may be connected, but somewhere got disconnected. Today you can reconnect by saying, God, I've been away. It might have been the pandemic, it might have been a crisis in my own life, but God, I've just been away. But even though I've been away before, God, I'm right here.